Welcome to the Volpe Report podcast, the state's premier public affairs show dedicated to the topics that matter most to Pennsylvanians. I'm your host, Chuck Volpe. Join us now as we speak to this week's guest.
The following half-hour show is a paid political program and is not endorsed by this station, management, or staff.
The following program is brought to you by Excalibur Insurance Management Services.
Once again, today's show will deal with the continuing government shutdown foisted on the American people by the radical socialist wing of the Democratic Party in Washington. But some might say, but Chuck, you have said the shutdown took place in the United States Senate under the direction of Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, and he has never been viewed as a radical socialist. And that's true. But it's also true that Chuck Schumer is so desperately afraid of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez running against him in the Democratic primary for a United States Senator from the state of New York, which is the Senate seat Schumer currently has, that Schumer capitulated. All you have to do is look back at the 15 videos going back 30 years. 15 different times Chuck Schumer looked into the camera, including just a couple months ago when he voted not to shut down the government again, despite tremendous pressure from Ocasio-Cortez and the radical wing of the Democratic Party. Schumer stood his ground and took tremendous flack because he said, you can't shut down the government. It does irreparable harm to the country. However, this time he capitulated, and the government and the country is living with the aftershocks of that, and none of it's good. So we have in studio today United States Congressman Dan Meuser, who, by the way, as I often say, is the most regular guest in the Volpe Report. And he's here to talk about the details of the shutdown, as well as the truth about what's driving it.
This is the Volpe Report, a weekly news and political interview show examining the latest local, state, and national issues with Chuck Volpe. Insightful, informative, controversial. The area's premier political talk show, the Volpe Report.
Dan, welcome back to the Volpe Report.
Always great to be with you, my friend.
I want to say, as many times as you've been on, dozens of times now, the last several, it seems like, your duties have kept you in Washington, and we've done a bunch of Zooms. They have that beautiful press thing. In fact, Rob Bresnahan was just the preceding guest, and they have the Capitol behind them. It's all pretty neat, that the congressional press room that you guys use. And so it's good to have you actually in studio, face-to-face. And, I said to my audience, and of course in my introduction that I already did, I said to the audience that, there's no bigger issue right now going on in the United States than the fact that our government is shut down. So right now, where do we stand other than we know we're shut down? Take it from there.
Well, appreciate it. And yes, as you have more of a tenure, more seniority in Washington, subcommittee chair in financial services and a committee, and my seniority on small business administration, there's a lot of reasons that I need to be in D.C. The close relationship I have with leadership, particularly Mike Johnson. Fortunately, I have his ear, and he and I talk sometimes every day, at least 2 times, maybe 3 times a week. And as you know, I have a very good relationship with the White House.
Of course, the president.
Right up to the president. I was texting with him just a few days ago. But his cabinet just incredibly responsive, which should mean nothing but good things for my district and for Pennsylvania. From Howard Lutnick at Commerce, to Doug Collins at Veterans Affairs, to Department of Education. I mean, the list, Department of Transportation, my friend Sean Duffy. So the list goes on. So all of this should mean very good things for Pennsylvania, for our district, and I'm leaning in hard all the time to deliver, right? But first and foremost, what always comes first and truly is constituent services. Just like when I was in business, what comes first? Customer services.
Of course.
I mean, product is up there, just like, and I refer to in government, in this work, I consider policy the product, right, because that really is what they're buying in the end. Right. But those services come first: responsiveness, answering the phone, things of that nature. And I have to tell you, this shutdown is affecting our ability to serve our constituents. I was just with our district director, Mike Shea, who's the ultimate caseworker and changes and trains all of our people. I mean, we do so much great work when it comes to the IRS, Social Security, passports, veterans issues. I mean, the list just goes on. And all of those are being mitigated now because of the shutdown. IRS claims, our IRS advocate is going to be furloughed as of tomorrow. So the tax questions that come in. So there's you know what, there's a lot of pain and there's no gain. And that's what has me very upset about the fact that the Democrats voted to put us into this shutdown. And meanwhile, they'll come out on any show from MSNBC to, 4 out of the 5 shows, how somehow this is a Republican shutdown. Oh, yeah? In the House, we had one Republican vote to not for the continued resolution. Right. And of course, in the Senate, we have one, Rand Paul, who's voting against it. And every Democrat, but 3 at this point, right, are voting to keep our government shut down. Right. And it's not just a mild shutdown. Our military will not be paid. They get paid every 2 weeks. They won't be paid as of October 15th. So what is that? Next Wednesday, right. The military, and they're preparing for this, right? They're preparing for a lot of them live paycheck to paycheck. Right. The WIC program. What's right, that? Something, the Women and Infant Children program, which is a special nutritional subsidy program, similar to SNAP, but for women with infant children. Many of our military utilize that fund for their families, which is a shame in itself, but it's true. They're being double hit over this. And what are they saying? You've got Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer leading this thing and forcing their members, because there's a fair number of Democrat members that are their constituents are very upset with them over it. But unfortunately, they're forced to walk the line on that side of the aisle. And look, this thing, we could go on and on. But Tom Cole had an initial agreement. He's our appropriations chairman. He's probably one of the most respected people on both sides of the aisle. Everybody likes him because he's trustworthy. He had an agreement. We were going to have a clean CR, and they said, okay, just make it short term. Okay, easy enough. Then we do our appropriations, then we have our budget fight. So we took it to November 21st. Then they came up with those ridiculous demands, $1.4 trillion of spending that was reduced during the BBB. Refund NPR and PBS. Okay, meanwhile, we're running $1.8 trillion deficits, America and Northeast Pennsylvania and Central Pennsylvania, deficits. Those are annual reductions in or debts that are being manifested. So, and then they came out, and then since that was seen as nonsensical, and weak demands. And they came up with this ACA thing, which we all knew about. We knew we had to deal with it. And that's the Affordable Care Act, which, by the way, should have been called the Unaffordable Care Act. I mean, let's face it.
You always come up with a quip on every single show. It's great. That should be another bumper sticker.
It's got an overrun of $250 billion. And you know why? Because when they changed it in the rescue plan, the Democrats changed it in the rescue plan, they put in some temporary measures to allow subsidies to those who are making over $500,000. They made it temporary. Okay, they passed it because it was done during COVID. And they also had something in there that allowed insurance companies to receive taxpayer funds through the ACA, through the misnamed Affordable Care Act. So 33% of that funding of hundreds of billions of dollars is going directly to insurance companies without any services being rendered. Those are the portions that we need to improve upon, correct, right, reform in the interests of our country's solvency.
Well, Dan, I don't even know where to start. You said some great things, and part of the reasons for having you back and doing this show, maybe it's the lawyer in me, but you sometimes need to discuss the evidence, and you got to parse it. You got to go piece by piece by piece by piece. First, there was a list of demands presented as a take it or leave it, gun to the Republicans' head, demands by the Democrats. So now, since they're in the minority and have no power, which gets back to the point of the question, people say, well, how can they shut down the government? It has to be the Republicans because they have the majorities. How could the Democrats? Well, we get to the United States Senate. And under the rules of the United States Senate, known as the filibuster rule, all legislation which continuing resolutions fall under, except for, there's the exception, obviously, that I won't get into those issues. But they, under the 60 rule or a 60 vote rule, you need 60 members for anything to go forward and be put to a vote. It's called a filibuster. So what Chuck Schumer did in the minority with his 47 senators, you needed a few of them to join the Republicans to get to the threshold of 60. When I say you, I mean your colleagues in the United States Senate. Dave McCormick, for example, not you in the House. You passed it in the House. The CR went through the House. Yeah. So basically, you needed to get to 60, and Chuck Schumer withheld those votes. So the Democrats, by not allowing their members to vote to get past the filibuster threshold, the Democratic senators shut this thing down and are responsible for shutting down the government. So I wanted to get that part out of the way. Now we go to second. The second thing is we get to some of the issues. Issue number one, there were insidious ways through NGOs and through USAID, they were funding all of these ridiculous, wasteful things. Well, one of the things that they're funding through Medicaid was illegals were getting Medicaid. One of the things the big, beautiful bill did is took that away. Okay. They want it back in, so they shut down the government. The next thing...
They put it in writing. They want it back in. They'll go on television or anything else and say, no, we don't. Meanwhile, it's in writing.
It was up on the screen.
Look at speaker.gov. Mike Johnson put it on his front open page.
Now let's go to the second thing, as you had mentioned too. Obamacare, otherwise known as AFA, the Affordable Care Act. In the Affordable Care Act, during the pandemic, they did a lot of things. They helped businesses with PPP and other things because of the strain with the shutdowns that put on the economy. Well, one of the things they did, they were going to subsidize all the increased health care costs because the Affordable Care Act could have been overrun, federal subsidies to help them through the COVID-19 pandemic. And that's another thing that the big, beautiful bill, you didn't even take it away. Yeah. It just sunset naturally. It was scheduled back in 2021 to end in 2025. You didn't do a thing. They agreed. The Democrats agreed that it would sunset. Now they've put a written demand. They want that back in. With all of these issues, all you did was let natural things sunset, take away subsidies you should have that shouldn't have been provided to illegals. They like to say undocumented. No, it's a crime. You broke the law and you're here illegally. It's illegal. The statute says illegal. So with all those things, they now put a gun to your head and say, if you don't put all this back in and cause $1.5 trillion in new spending to bankrupt this country, we're going to shut down the government. And they shut down the government. If I missed something?
No. I think you filled it in very well. And all accurate, by the way. I'd say 100% accurate. And then meanwhile, we have Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader, who I call Hakeem the hypocrite, because, right? And
bumper stickers.
Schumer, and he and Schumer are well known for condemning CRs for the last 10 years. I mean, we got, let's go to the videotape on 13 just during the Biden administration that I signed on to, because at last resort, shutting down the government, nobody wins in the end. Look, I got a big part of my base that have said, shut it down, but nobody wins in the end, particularly when the Democrats were there and will likely continue, those whom federal workers take 2 weeks off and then come back and get full pay. So the whole thing is just backfires like what most of liberalism does. But to your point, just how hypocritical a lot of this is. And look, much of their work, they try to pretend Republicans are the work for the elitists. You guys are for billionaires. There's a commercial right now that I saw yesterday on Rob Bresnahan stating how you're taking away my Medicaid. And the woman on it honestly ought to be ashamed of herself and whoever produced it. And you're beckoning to the call of billionaires. First of all, there are 792 billionaires in the United States. If there's one in Rob Bresnahan's district, that's one more than it's in my district.
There's
okay? We don't do anything for billionaires. Okay. What we cared about in the BBB, for instance, was the 160 million taxpayers that are out there that would have had a enormous and 35 million small businesses that would have had nearly a 25% tax increase. Okay, they love not saying that. And meanwhile, on the Medicaid stuff, okay, nothing's being taken away. Nothing is touching Medicare, by the way. Zero was not included, no changes whatsoever. which protesters outside my office say, you're taking my Medicare. No, that wasn't even included. And regarding Medicaid, it's likely not going to be affected at all, even with some of the common sense improvements, until January 1st, 2029 in Pennsylvania. So, and so these commercials are outrageous.
So you shut down and bankrupt our country in 2025.
Yeah.
That's the theory?
And for what purpose? For what purpose? Two reasons. There's only two. One, Chuck Schumer's fighting for his political life. AOC, scary
Get a primary and run
AOC,
against
the
him
new
for Senate.
leader of this left-wing lunatic Democrat Party, okay?
Not to interrupt you, real quick. Did
Yeah.
you see the clip? I saw it on CNN. She looks into the camera, and because they asked her, well, everybody's saying you're really driving this and threatening Schumer, and you're really maybe the leader of the Republican Party. And she goes, well, if that's what they say, let them come and negotiate directly with me.
Yeah.
She actually said that.
Well, I look, she plays off of her personality and her notoriety and her ability to raise money. See, that's part of the whole radicalism. That's where a lot of their money comes from the George Soroses and all the push to that very, very left-wing party. And that's where their power comes from, right? That's the funding that they bring in. But here you got Schumer, who's afraid. He's putting the country, 750,000 federal workers that they need, by the way, for their voting in Virginia and Maryland and everywhere else.
They don't care about any of those people.
He's furloughing all of them.
Yeah.
Because he's afraid if he caves in, does the right thing, AOC is going to
run against him and take
run
him out
against
of
him.
Senate.
And the other reason is, the reason Jeffrey is in it all is shutting it down is because the Trump agenda is doing too well. We're delivering successes. Where's all the calamity? Okay, they say the tariffs were going to cause all kinds of inflation. Meanwhile, we had 9% inflation under Biden. Yeah. Right now, it's 2.7%. We got high GDPs. We got interest rates coming down. We've got full workforce. We got wages going up. We got investment taking place. We've got an energy boom actually taking place now.
We're on the way.
Gasoline
to
prices
recovery.
coming down.
In less than 1 year, we're on the road to recovery. What the president promised, make America great again, is happening.
And the only way that they can stop it, because they don't have ideas of their own to enhance it or improve it or even change it a little, is to stop it, is to be destructive disruptors. We like creative disruptors. They are destructive disruptors, and it's damaging to the people they pretend to be helping.
Yeah. Well, with that well-spoken and eloquent piece, we're going to take a quick break and then come back. I want to talk about, because we've talked about the shutdown, where do we go from here? And I want to talk about you and some of the things you've got going in your district that I'm sure people, they're not going anymore. Since
not as well. We're working, though.
You're working, but the money that you need to bring back to your district, that's not happening.
And by the way, the military doesn't get paid. I don't get paid. And I know Rob Bresnahan did the same thing.
How about this Hakeem Jeffries? He was asked twice on CNN with a microphone. Now, since no one's getting paid in the government because of this Democratic shutdown, will you forego your paycheck as many legislators have done? He goes, look, a lawyer's dodge. I didn't hear a lawyer disassemble. He said, it's a biweekly, so I don't even have to make that decision yet because I already got this week's check. And then he said some more gobbledygook, and then. But the follow-up was, you haven't answered the question, Mr. Leader. Will you? He said, I'll make that decision when the time comes when I have to make it. Something to garbage. Just say you're not taking a paycheck. Obviously, he is taking a paycheck.
You know what's terrific, though? Meet the Press the other day called him out, went through the wins on the Republican side, and he just sat there, had to listen on Squawk Box, CNBC, and NBC station. They went through all of the positives that were taking place and the fact that all the Democrats voted to put us to shut down the government. And Chris Cuomo was probably one of the best when he came out and he said, America, I just got to tell you, what the Democrats are saying simply isn't true.
It isn't. They lie.
Right.
But that's all they do is lie. And the people, I think, have finally started to figure that out. Well, at any rate, we'll be back. We're with United States Congressman Dan Meuser talking about the ongoing government shutdown. But we'll personalize it to northeastern Pennsylvania when we come back after this message.
There are more places you can see the Volpe Report. Watch every Sunday morning at 10:30 on Fox 56 or watch on YouTube at the Volpe Report. More ways to watch. Still the same premier political talk show dedicated to the topics that matter most to Pennsylvanians.
Welcome back. We're here with our United States Congressman, a member of some of the most important committees in the United States Congress. And since I think I've said in this show that over 60% of the gross national product of the United States of America is driven by small business. Small business has always been the backbone of this country. It's Main Street America, and Dan sits on the Small Business Committee of the United States Congress. So, in a lot of those important things, and you know, when we were talking off air, Dan, and now that we're back on the air, you know, one other point we get back to these Democratic demands. One of their demands would defund $50 billion dollars that were earmarked under the big, beautiful bill for rural hospitals. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the thought that occurred to me, why would they target that? But then I remembered that the Democrats, clearly, starting with Hillary Clinton and then following up with AOC and Schumer and all the rest, you know, we've talked on this show for years now of the migration of the Democratic Party. It used to believe in American values. It believed in the Judeo-Christian values that this country was founded on. It believed and worked for the working class, middle class America, the people that weren't the elites, the people that, you know, have all the PhDs and the doctorates, the drivers of our economy, the small business owners. That was the Democratic base. And they have completely left those people behind, which is why they've been losing elections. So, you know, how do you take, and again, back to the big, beautiful bill, which provided this funding, one of their demands, I'm trying to wrap my head around this, was to gut the $50 billion.
That's right.
Can you, explain, how... remember, your district is rural. Yeah. We live in rural. We're like the king of the dairy farm area of northeast and central Pennsylvania, rural folks. Yeah. And we don't have enough hospitals or dental care or health care generally. So why would they cut that funding?
Well, because they don't feel as if they represent rural America. And so, therefore, it's a political move on their part. Why would they provide funding for rural America if they don't think that's where their votes are? That's how, unfortunately, they think. When I say everything they do is political, everything they do is political. Not every one of them, but certainly their leadership. They're politically better off by giving huge funding and subsidies and everything else to urban hospitals, which I'm not against, of course. And you want to know what? Got to give credit where credit's due. Rob Bresnahan had a lot to do with that $50 billion. He had some issues with some of the provider levels of taxation that could be imposed, which are state fixed and state run, by the way. The state can override it. But this more than makes up for that $50 billion. And again, Rob had a lot to do with it. And now, you know, the Democrats want to remove it. Yeah. How about they fought against the 20% tax relief for small business? You're talking about small business.
We talked about 60% of our economy is small business driven.
Yeah. So they're not for those that really make the difference in America. Okay. And look at the polls. Look at registration. Those blue collar. Let's face it. 15, 20, certainly 30, 40, 50 years ago, blue collar were part of the Democrat Party.
They were the base of the Democratic Party.
Not anymore. Those are our voters. That's why no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. All of that is very, very meaningful. Frankly, not to the Democrat elites, but to many within our party. And look, you gotta serve your district as a member. The day you don't do that is the day they're going to vote you out, and rightfully so. So what you were asking about, there's a lot of agriculture in my district. I work with G.T. Thompson.
Of course.
We make sure. Yeah, we make sure we're doing things, and we even have some new subsidies coming out because the tariffs are the agricultural industry. Farmers are taking a little bit more of a brunt than it in the short term. So The president's, whether I agree with him or not, and I do, but the president's making that decision. But some other things that I'm doing, where there was a lot of debanking that was taking place of the energy industry. The Biden industry was pressuring, threatening community banks, mid-sized banks.
Oh, yeah, to
and big
disinvest
banks
from any sort of fossil fuel or natural gas.
Don't provide loans or lines of credit to the energy industry.
Yeah.
It was happening. We have the documentation. So my committee, my subcommittee on oversight and investigations in financial services, we've had hearings on it. We've straightened it out. I spoke as well with Scott Bessent just yesterday, I guess it was, our Treasury Secretary. We discussed that. We discussed everything that still needs to be done to remove that out of the bank's culture, as well as out of their IT systems. Right. I mean, they used to send guidance letters out as if they were law, right, telling them what they could do and who they should be investing with and what level of their loan should be with what companies, rather than let businesses and banks operate on their own. And I also talked with Scott Bessent yesterday about a task force for anti-fraud measures that consumers are dealing with. There's a lot of scams and frauds taking place.
I've dealt with 3 in the last month myself.
Exactly. So this is something that will be my focus for at least the remaining of the year, maybe through next year. We're going to have a number of priorities, but I think this will be very meaningful to my constituents, to all of Pennsylvania, to all of America. And there are international crime organizations involved here. There are local. We need social media's assistance here. We need telecom. I need the FBI to do a better job, frankly, enforcing. And there's an organization known as FinCEN that is getting on board with us. So that's going to be a big focus. And people and banks are going to be a big part of this. The more information, education their customers have, they feel that is the best way to assure that people don't fall for these scams. Banks would never ask you to text you your credit card. No bank will do that. No bank would ever say to send you my credit card over the internet. Microsoft, the Department of Transportation, Dave Sunday just put something out that I put out on my webpage as well. There's a fake DOT message going out. You owe $8.99. If you don't pay it right now or within 24 hours, you're going to lose your license. And that's a complete scam. That's complete fraud. If people out there are ever in doubt, you can contact my office. I know you can contact Rob Bresnahan, Ryan McKenzie's, any member of Congress. We're working this, and you could certainly just don't respond. Contact the bank. Contact the Department of Transportation. And I'll tell you what, our Attorney General, Dave Sunday, is doing a fantastic job on it as well.
Done. Well, Dan, thank you as always, my friend.
Yeah, it's great.
Again, we're here today with United States Congressman Dan Meuser. And again, it was not my intention to devote 2 straight weeks to the shutdown of government. But right now, there's nothing more important to talk about because the almighty federal government is not working for the American citizens. Individual legislators like Dan are still working his district constituent services, but the fact of the matter is government is shut down, and we are all going to start to feel the pain. The Democratic Party, the National Democratic Congressional delegation has held this country hostage, and the hypocrisy and the lies are, all you have to do is look back to about 8 different clips covering 30 years of Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, who's most responsible. Remember, this happened in the Senate because of the 60-vote threshold and the filibuster. He gives impassioned speeches back from the mid-'90s, 13 of them or so, about how you can never shut down the government. You have to work through your policy districts, but you pass continuing resolutions because the government has to function for the American people. He did that just March, right, a few months ago, to vote for it again. And now, all of a sudden, he's had an epiphany, apparently. More lies, more hypocrisy from the Democrats in Washington. With that, I hope next week's show we'll be able to talk about something other than the government shutdown. But if that's the case, we'll keep talking about it. See you next week. Thanks for joining us for this edition of the Volpe Report podcast. Be sure to visit our YouTube and Facebook pages for upcoming episodes. You can catch up on the Volpe Report podcast on your favorite podcast provider.